Welcome to the Determined People podcast. We are committed to spreading encouragement, strength, and hope to a world in desperate need of it. Everywhere you look in today's culture, you see stories of remarkable people experiencing remarkable success. Our show focuses on the backstories of everyday, relatable people who have achieved greatness in their lives. We focus on the story behind what we see in the world. Our hope is that you find yourself in these stories, that you say, if that person made it, so can I. And now, our host, John Harrell.
Welcome to the show. Before we get started, I'd like to ask you one favor. Would you please hit the subscribe button? Every time that we have a new episode come out, which is every 2 weeks, then you will be notified. And we're just spreading encouragement, strength, and hope, and our world desperately needs those things. So please hit that subscribe button, share it with your family, your friends, your acquaintances, and I promise you won't be disappointed. We've got great guests. My guest today is Ashley Evans. She is a trauma-focused therapist and a personal coach, certified personal coach. Ashley uses a variety of modalities in her approach to therapy. One is eye movement desensitization repositioning, which you may know as EMDR. I've done EMDR. We may get into that. She uses cognitive behavioral therapy, changing the way we think. And she also uses something called brain spotting, something I had not heard of until I started doing research for this article. So we'll talk about that. And she does trauma. She focuses on using psychedelics in the approach to healing trauma. It's something that is fascinating. We're going to talk about the weekends that she does using toad venom or dimethyltryptamine. That's a mouthful. So let's get this trip started. Ashley, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
What led you into becoming a therapist?
You know, my own personal journey with complex PTSD sent me down the rabbit hole of, you know, wanting to learn more, wanting to be able to help myself and help other family members who had struggled with addiction and things like that. And so part of it was, you know, personal, but also just that need of wanting to help others and connect.
How did you know you had PTSD? And the reason I ask that is this: I had PTSD, which I always thought PTSD was bullshit till I got it. Like,
yes.
No, this is real. I was like a walking zombie. How did you recognize you had PTSD?
You know, it became overwhelmingly clear. My reactions, my flashbacks, my startle responses, it became so evident that I really had this kind of epiphany moment where I knew this was not something that you know, it wasn't just you know, something that I could brush away, and that it was a lot more serious. And I, like you, I have a deep respect for PTSD, complex PTSD, and the impact that can have on somebody physically as well as emotionally.
But you took it a step further, not just getting treatment for yourself and healing. You decided to actually go help others heal. I think that's remarkable.
Thank you.
I have a question though. We still stigmatize therapy. Why?
You know, I think that a long time ago when therapy came onto the scene, say in the 50s, when there were veterans that were returning from war and they were having to deal with PTSD, and kind of therapy became a little bit more known, but it also became this, again, like you're saying, it became about what was wrong or what was pathologic with the client or the patient. And, you know, now I feel like that there has been much more acceptance. I do think there still is a stigma, don't get me wrong, especially sometimes with maybe, you know, my generation, you know, or a little bit older. But I also find it very interesting that sometimes I'm having a lot more young males, in fact, that do come forward for therapy and that are interested in bettering themselves, or have growth mindset. They want to work on issues, and they're taking accountability. And really, I think that some of the millennials view therapy as a form of self-care, and you know, like getting a massage, so to speak, or you know, something of that nature. So I do think that there's a little bit of change there.
That's great, because you know, I do believe that the bravest people are ones that seek therapy, because self-work is hard. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do, but anything that is worthwhile is going to be hard, but then you value it because you earn it. And I look back at my own, decade of being with a psychotherapist, and I, it's important I found the right guy. But I look at the way I was a decade ago and then the way I am now, and I'm going, I see the results. I do the work. He does the gentle nudging, the kicking the ass every now and then, but the gentle nudging, and like I compare it to, we're walking through the rainforest, and he has the machete, and he's clearing the path, and I'm just following along behind and trusting him to lead me where I need to be. Does that make sense?
Great analogy. Great.
So when you have a new client come in, there's always going to be that, typically that guard is going to be up because they don't know you and they want to establish trust, and you want to establish trust with them. What's that first session typically like?
I think it really depends on the client. Some clients are eager to get in there and to be able to talk and share because they don't have, just like you and I were discussing earlier, very often men don't have opportunities to be vulnerable because they have been taught for so long that the only acceptable emotion is anger, that shows power and strength or brute. So that is acceptable, but showing vulnerability or fear, worry, anxiety, men have been conditioned that it's not safe. And so, I do find that there will be men that will come in and they will say they've never had an opportunity to discuss some of the things that we discuss because they don't feel safe. So I do feel like it just really varies from client to client.
One of my observations about men has always been that men typically don't have friends. They have acquaintances, they have work buddies or whatever, or colleagues, or maybe their significant other, there's somebody to hang around with, go to dinner with, shoot the breeze with when you're together, but that's not a real friend. That's not a real intimate friendship where you can talk about stuff with other men. Women are much better at that than we are. So I'm encouraged to hear that. One of the areas you do work with a lot is men. You've got an entire tab on your website for men. You do group therapy with men. I guess it's telehealth. How do you get men to open up when they're with a bunch of other people that are strangers and, like you say, we're reticent to kind of let it all out, right? How do you do that?
I think sometimes by the fact of seeing that there are other men that are there and that are willing to be vulnerable or that are facing the same issues that they are, they don't feel like they're, alone or there's something defective with them, and they see the commonality in that. And sometimes I think it's just very cathartic to be able to, to understand that someone else is dealing, with the same struggles.
Got you right, because sometimes you do feel alone in the struggles, right?
Right. And
I'm the father of two boys, and I said, here's what men. When they were 18, they both said to me, well, I'm 18, so I'm a man now. I'm like, okay, what's a man look like? Like, I don't know, they do men stuff, but no. Men are the last ones to be served. Men are the ones who are responsible. They're the ones who don't want credit for anything. They just are men, all right? And you have to have that inner strength without my way or the highway. And that is a struggle for a lot of men because, like you say, men have been conditioned oftentimes to show loud voice, and we're typically bigger than women are. We carry more muscle, and we have a deeper tone, or show anger, which is not healthy at all. That doesn't create connection with other people.
Right.
Let's talk about some therapeutic modalities. Would you explain what EMDR is and how it actually works?
So EMDR is the eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It involves the bilateral stimulation, sometimes auditory, sometimes visual, sometimes with a finger or a light, or digitally. For telehealth, for example, there's applications that mimic light or sound. And it's just a talk therapy that involves the therapist and the client, talking through issues, focusing on where there are cognitive distortions, where there have been items from their past that have not been properly processed, and then there's, say, this little capsule of trauma still in their brain, that in being able to follow the stimulus and have dual attention on the stimulus that's going back and forth, as well as holding the idea of, for example, the traumatic experience in their head at the same time, holding these two dual thoughts, being able to work through and reprocess those things that happened to them. Now, as an adult, it becomes very apparent through talking very often of things that they perhaps missed when they were a child, or having memories that they didn't recall, that come up from the subconscious, that then factor in, and they're able to relate and piece things together. And it's pretty fascinating because you might not necessarily walk out of the session feeling like, oh, everything's fine now. But then you might notice that your reaction to anger or traffic, for example, or things that would normally trigger you, you suddenly notice that they're decreased. So it's pretty cool.
That is really cool. You know, my own experience with the EMDR was my therapist used it for my PTSD. And I didn't walk out of that session changed, really. I was, but didn't know it yet. And he had shared that with me. He said it may take 1 or 2 sessions, it may take 3, I don't know. It took 1 for me. But within about 10 days, I found myself laughing again, smiling again, and I noticed it. I'm going, okay, my brain is rebooting, is the way he described it. What it really did. I'm like, wow. But it works. I mean, it's crazy that you mentioned talk therapy. You know, back in October, I had a very violent car wreck, and it created a trauma response in me. Now, what I would say to you is this: I've had probably 12 to 15 violent car wrecks over the course of my life. So I'm like, what's one more, right? What is one more? But this one impacted me differently, and I could feel it. So I called David, my psychotherapist, said, I may need an EMDR, I don't know, but I got a couple of hours scheduled. Let's talk this thing through. And we didn't do EMDR, but he did just talk through. He kept having me go through and relive the accident, relive. And the mind is so amazing, because the more that we would talk about it, the more I would remember. It's all there. It's just been buried, perhaps. And finally, the telltale moment for me, Ashley, was in my mind as my car is spinning, and it was a violent collision. I was like, is this it? It was the finality of it. Like, is this how I go out? And that was what caused the trauma response. But the talking it through, and I kept going, okay, we're going to talk this thing. You want me to describe it one more time? And he goes, yeah, just keep going. And it's like, we got there. But the mind is so incredible. So what you're talking about with EMDR, though, almost sounds like that brain spotting might have come out of EMDR, right?
Yes, brain spotting is slightly different and newer to me, although equally fascinating. I have amazing sessions with brain spotting as well, and it involves more of keeping the eyes fixed on a stimulus or a certain location, perhaps even looking away or focusing on, say, the therapist's finger, as opposed to it being bilateral and moving back and forth. But again, equally fascinating and amazing what little tweaks can have such a huge impact on the brain.
Yeah, and with the one of the videos I watched about brain spotting showed a man with a pointer. And I'm thinking, you got my attention, because I'm not sure you're not going to whack me with that pointer, right? During therapy. Yes. So before we get into psychedelics, because this is fascinating to me, on your website, you say that you don't remain neutral in the therapeutic session. So that suggests to me you really immerse yourself in the moment. So my question to you is, Ashley, how do you take care of yourself? Because actively listening to someone is exhausting. And that just seems like it would be taxing on you. How do you take care of yourself and not take that home with you?
Good question. I have been asked that quite a bit, and for some reason I am, whether it's through things that I have gone through, in my own life, personally, professionally, being able to, I think, connect and relate to someone in that moment and be present with them during their pain, the feeling of that, and the meaning that it brings to me, and being able to share that with them, and being able to help help them heal, or witness, see who they are, is affirming enough. It doesn't feel depleting whatsoever. It actually feels very additive.
Interesting. That's a unique answer I didn't expect. That's great, though. Additive. Okay. So post-pandemic, depression, anxiety, I read from the World Health Organization, is up 25%. I think that's probably low, because I didn't really, the way they studied it just said this suggests to me that it probably is low. Suicidal ideations are way up. Of course, in 2016, youth suicide became the #2 killer of kids, and it rages on. How did we get here, and why are we so angry with each other?
Well, let me say, I think social media certainly has a huge effect on all of this. Comparison, feeling less than, materialism, the image of perfection, this illusion, which of course no one is perfect, but we can internalize and feel like that, others have it made, or they know what to do, or they figured life out and somehow we haven't. And that's just not the truth. But I think that we put a lot of pressure on ourselves.
Yes, and comparison is a never-ending rabbit hole you can go down, and it just is so futile. There's no reason to ever do that.
The thief of joy.
Yeah, that's right. And we're uniquely created by our Creator to be who He wanted us to be, and for me, that's good enough, right? Doesn't mean I'm not always trying to improve myself, but it means if God, the Creator of the universe, looks at me and goes, "That's my boy," that's okay. But it takes it a step further. I have to look at you and say, He created you exactly how He wants you to be, and not be judgmental towards somebody. Just say, they're who He created them to be. It's not my place to run their life, right? But just to accept them, and I think I said to you off camera, it's like, I like everybody except assholes and pedophiles. So if you're not one of those, we're good, right?
I like it.
So let's talk about dimethyltryptamine, or kissing the toad, as you call it.
Yes.
How did your interest in psychedelics come about?
Well, let me state that I was not interested in psychedelics whatsoever. I did keep getting these flyers that were advertising psychedelic training for therapists. I get lots of these kinds of trainings for different things, and so I would brush them off. But the more I thought about it, I kept wondering, how is it that psychedelics work? What makes it helpful in this case? Is it getting high and then you just feel better? I couldn't wrap my brain around it. Eventually, after long period of research and investigation and witnessing a close friend of mine who went through his own plant medicine journey, it really turned me on to trying it myself. And I am a little bit more of a risk taker, but again, psychedelics, it brought up the notions of nausea and fear, and I'm very prone to nausea, so that was not really something that I was that excited about. I procrastinated a little bit, thought about doing ayahuasca. I'd investigated that, but knew that there were some bad side effects of purging, and that kept me status quo. And then, this kind of fluke series of events happened, and finding out about the toad venom, and there I was.
We have a brief video clip of you experiencing toad venom in your own trip, and so we're going to play that right now so people can see. And you look like you're staring at God. You're in awe. I mean, it's like you said, this is pure bliss.
The most profound experience of my life, short of birthing my children, but the most religious, profound, beautiful moment.
So you truly connected with the divine.
Yes, there is no question, and
that's scary to me. Okay,
right. It is a very powerful experience, and I think that there is no way that you can walk away from that experience and not be changed.
You host weekends away from Dallas, and it's legal.
Yes.
So tell us what those weekends mean. What do you do over the course of that weekend?
So I have two versions of the Kiss the Toad, psychedelic trauma healing. I have a city version, as I'm calling it, the City Toad, and country and Country Toad is the weekend-long retreat. The weekend-long retreat is a little bit more intensive. It has more therapeutic preparation and lead up to it. There's some yoga, meditation. We'll be staying in a very nice, unique, luxurious home down in the Texas Hill Country. It is for coming together, having connection, there being music, delicious food, and really being able to share with focused intention on our healing journey.
And the administration of DMT, or dimethyltryptamine, is under the guise of someone who's trained in this, in addition to yourself. Correct.
Absolutely. So this does involve a trained and experienced plant medicine man, a shaman, and someone who is trained in dosages and different medicines. There are various kinds of plant medicines that produce psychedelic effects. I personally chose the toad because it had some advantages in my mind. And so, it's very short acting, and it is very powerful. And, the long weekend really goes through a lot more therapeutic process. The quicker version is also a little bit lighter, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So I want to finish with one question. And what would you say to people who are afraid to embrace therapy, who are thinking about it, they know there's something wrong? I think it was Carl Jung, the famous Swiss psychiatrist, who said unresolved trauma becomes tomorrow's neuroses. You know, the traumas continue, they will continue to surface. Mm-hmm. But what I've learned about the mind is that your brain only allows it to come to the surface when you're ready to heal from it. Mm-hmm. You can tamp it back down, mm-hmm. but it'll come back, and at one point, you can't run from it. It's there. Mm-hmm. What do you say to people who are experiencing this, and maybe they're afraid to go try any kind of therapy, whether it's DMT or if it's just cognitive brain therapy? I mean, what do you say to them?
You know, I think sometimes it can be scary because people feel like that, you know, once they walk into the therapy room, that either they have to cry, or as they start to lean into it, it's scary. That's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to, you know, look at yourself, to see what's happened, to understand that very often it is us ourselves who are holding ourselves back, and that can be very scary. But I also find that truly my clients, I would say, I really find that clients who come to therapy are the most growth-oriented, goal-oriented amongst us. They're the ones that are in there wanting to be accountable, wanting to show up, wanting to better themselves. Obviously, there's a spectrum of it, but the fact that they're getting themselves in there, I think says a lot about them in the first place. I'll leave it at that.
It takes a brave first step to walk in there,
yes,
and then keep showing up. And again, I also emphasize to people, make sure you find the right therapist.
Yes.
Somebody that you can connect with. It's a rarity that you would build trust immediately. My psychotherapist, I trust completely. So when he suggests something, I'm like, I don't want to do it, but you've always been right. He's always had my best interest at heart. So there's so many dynamics, and the world is harsh. It'll knock you down. Sad thing is, I always told my sons growing up, said, you know, most people kind of want to see you fail, and they're taking account. They're keeping an account of how many times that you do something wrong. So you have to focus on what you do well, and what you do right. And if you ever want to know what you don't do well, ask anybody. They're willing to share that with you. And I think that's sort of how the world is. Mm-hmm. But we have got to just take the responsibility for our own personal growth. It is a decision to decide to grow, or you can remain status quo and be unfulfilled. So, Ashley, thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to check out DMT, which I will tell my audience I'm going to be one of your participants at the Weekend Away, July 22nd through 24th. So
excited.
Yeah, well, I always say life is a trip. Sometimes it's a trip down the yellow brick road. Sometimes it's an acid trip. We'll see what this one turns out to be. So thank you. And thank you again for coming on today.
Thank you so much.
And that is our show for today. And I want to say again, thank you to Ashley Evans. And what I want to say to you is this. If you're one of the people who's dealing with depression, anxiety, hopelessness, fear, please reach out to someone. Reach out to Ashley. She has a phone number, which we'll put all of her contact information on screen. And you can have a 10-minute confidential conversation with her. Therapy will allow you, over time, to restore your life, and you can live fully again. So please, if you're one of those people, I encourage you, don't hesitate. Take that brave first step. You'll be glad you did. That's it for today, and I will be back on the audio podcast tomorrow with another inspirational message offering encouragement, strength, and hope. Until then, everyone, be well.